Welcome to the Uncanny Magazine Podcast, episode 63A. I am Michael Damian Thomas, the co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine.
And I am Lynne M. Thomas, the co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine.
Welcome, Space Unicorns. We've made it to March, so it is spring.
Ish.
It is actually, it actually had warmed up here in Champaign-Urbana this week, so it does feel like slightly spring, so probably pretty soon.
It's mud week.
It's mud week, we will feel sick, and, you know.
Allergies will start again.
Allergies will start again, but otherwise...
Circle of life.
That is it, Space Unicorns.
Yeah. We're still here.
Fabulous news, Space Unicorns. It's time to announce the top story in our Uncanny Magazine 2024 Favorite Fiction Reader Poll. It is...
the short story Marginalia by Mary Robinette Kowal.
So congratulations to Mary Robinette. A snazzy certificate will soon be on the way.
Once I print it.
Yep. The rest of the top 5 are...
the novelette Signs of Life by Sarah Pinsker is in second place. The novelette Another Girl Under the Iron Bell by Angela Liu is in third place. The novelette Loneliness Universe by Evgenia Triantafilou is number 4. And fifth place is the short story Stitched to Skin Like Family Is by Nhi Vo.
So once again, congratulations to everybody, and thank you, Space Unicorns, who voted in the poll. Well, Space Unicorns, as it is springtime, it is that time of year. Hugo Award nominations are finally open for the Seattle Worldcon 2025. If you are a member of the Seattle Worldcon or a member of the previous Worldcon, feel free to look it up, but you should have received an email saying you are allowed to nominate for stuff. And last year was the 10th full year of Uncanny Magazine, issues 56 through 61. We are extremely proud of the year we had.
This year, Uncanny is still eligible for the Best Semi-Prozine Hugo Award. Michael and I are still also eligible for the Best Editor Short Form Hugo Award for editing issues 56 to 61. If you wish to honor us by nominating us in that category, please nominate us as a team. We do everything together.
If you go to the Uncanny Magazine website, you will still see the 2024 story eligibility list, and it will tell you all this eligibility information, plus which of the Uncanny stories from 2024 are in the short story, novelette, or novella categories of the Hugo Awards. Please also note the essays are eligible for the Best Related Work Hugo Award, and this year, poetry is also eligible for the Hugo Award. And you can also see an eligibility list of all the Uncanny poetry in a special blog post.
As Uncanny is a semi-prozine, the essays and original art also contribute towards the creator's Best Fan Writer and Best Fan Artist Hugo Award eligibility. And as always, read widely and nominate the things that you loved, Space Unicorns. Thank you.
This year, Space Unicorns, I will be, Michael Damian Thomas that is, returning to ICFA, that is the 46th International Conference for the Fantastic in Arts. And I will be there March 19th through 22nd at the Orlando Airport Marriott Lakeside. And I will be actually on a panel that is, I believe, at 8 a.m. with Sheila Williams from Asimov's, who probably has some interesting things to tell everybody right now, and Neil Clark from Clark's World. So please, if you're there, come and see our panel. I will be moderating.
Bring coffee.
And now, a word from our sponsor, which is probably us, or someone who we like a lot.
Hi, Erika.
Hi, Steven.
What are we doing here?
Well, we are talking about a Doctor Who podcast that we do together called Lazy Doctor Who.
Oh, really? What's that about?
It's where you and I watch Doctor Who from the very first episode, made in 1963, up to the present day, and then we talk about it on the podcast.
What, over 800 episodes of Doctor Who, from William Hartnell to Peter Capaldi, all in one sitting?
No, silly. We talk about each episode as we watch them, or maybe we talk about a couple episodes per podcast, or however many we feel like watching in a particular night.
Well, how on earth are we going to fit all of these podcasts in?
Well, that is the beauty of it. We record a podcast whenever we get around to it, and for however long we want to talk for. We're lazy like that.
So, it's a Doctor Who podcast where the hosts are kind of lazy, so...
Yep, Lazy Doctor Who. Find it on the Incomparable Network, on iTunes, or at lazydoctorwho.com.
Thanks for explaining that. I was feeling...
lazy?
Yeah.
So welcome back, Space Unicorns. In this episode of the Uncanny Magazine podcast, we are featuring not one, but two stories that are very reflective of the moment. Story number 1 is 10 Visions of the Future, or Self-Care for the End of Days by Samantha Mills. And story 2 is Butterfly Pavilion by G. Willow Wilson.
We also have the poem The Birds by Rafiat Lamidi.
And finally, Lynne M. Thomas interviews Samantha Mills.
That's me.
So the first story is, as many of you know, there's some stuff going on in the world right now which is kind of scary. So it's not that shocking that the zeitgeist is being filled once again by Samantha Mills. So this is a story that is a list story. It's a short one, but it is powerful. It is emotional.
And it is... I don't have a word for it.
But all of you probably saw Lynne's face there through
totally.
Through
You
the
saw
power
it
of
through
the
power of the
podcast.
podcast.
Everyone's favorite visual medium, the podcast.
It's a very visceral story.
And now, 10 Visions of the Future, or Self-Care for the End of Days by Samantha Mills, as read by Erika Ensign.
One. There is a future in which a hellgate opens off the coast of California. It happens at midnight on the first day of the new year, which is sooner than anyone expected. The waters rise and we are forced to abandon our home. But one of the neighbors has a spare raft we can borrow until the rescue boats arrive, so there's that. There is a moment on the raft where I'm crying. I'm dripping wet, and I'm clutching a bag of essentials that feels cosmically insufficient, and I'm spiraling out thinking of all the things we've already lost and everything we will stand to lose, and I look up at you and realize you've pulled a Yahtzee cup from your bag. At my incredulous look, you say, "We need something to do." I laugh for the first time since we got the news. 2. There is a future in which the old ones are called down upon our mortal plane, and they wreak horrors unimaginable upon the populace. An elephant-sized spider with mouths for eyes, a vampiric creature made of smoke and blood, a small army of gelatinous masses that cause deadly hallucinations at the barest touch, and more besides. That night, we are huddled in our living room, inside a protection circle we learned to draw from a YouTube video, when voices call to us through the front window. It's the elderly couple from next door, Marilyn and Ted. They remember the country's last stretch of eldritch horror, when the doomsday cultists first unmasked themselves in their century-long search for a hellgate, and they have a plan for neighborhood defense. "We'll take it in shifts," Marilyn says so firmly that I melt in relief. We cannot wield the deep magics necessary to close what the doomsday cultists opened, but we can do this. We can learn to make candles and draw lines of salt around our neighbors. You and Ted go door to door to round up more volunteers. There is a single father with 3 children in a panic. There is a rental house stuffed to the gills with broke college kids who are far from home. There are 2 middle-aged sisters taking care of their mother. I'm left with Marilyn. I ask, "How did you do it? How did you survive last time?" "Well," Marilyn says as tactfully as can be expected, "we didn't all make it last time. A mix of luck and circumstance, I suppose." Later, she teaches me how to crochet. It helps keep my hands off my phone. These are the amigurumi critters I crochet for all of our friends that winter, in order of decreasing jankiness. A bumblebee. A birthday cake. A potted cactus with button eyes. A baby axolotl. Celeste from Animal Crossing. Several Pokémon, including Snorlax. About half a dozen dumpster fires. And a Cthulhu beanie for Marilyn. I'm a little afraid the joke won't land, but she thinks it's hilarious. There's a yarn shortage, so the colors aren't accurate, but everyone says that adds to their charm. Seriously, Marilyn is the best. 3. There is a future in which a new virus sweeps the land before the last one has even fizzled out. If you catch it, your eyes bleed and you develop a craving for brains. On the news, there are stories about people holding bite parties to get it over with. The college kids all get sick, and we have to tear apart both our dressers to board the windows up while we wait for the cure to reach our neighborhood. You sign up with a volunteer collective, making food deliveries to the homes of the less agile, and I love you for that, but I'm boiling with worry every time you go out. I'm staring at the walls and wondering how long I should wait to panic if you're late, and what I'll do if you don't come back, and what I'll do if you come back wrong, and what we'll do if this never ends, and... We adopt a pair of cats. We name them Sean and Liz. Their antics are so infectious that for entire tens of minutes every day, I forget to worry. 4. There is a future in which the demon warlord Iscarioth lays claim to our neighborhood and demands tithes in the form of our happiest memories. We offer up an extra set, our honeymoon, R.I.P., to exempt the 3 little kids next door who don't have enough to spare. We learn to bake bread. 5. There is another future in which a freak blizzard sweeps its way south, and it seems like the entire world has been painted white. We've never experienced cold like this before. It is both terrifying and downright comical what we have to do to stay warm. We learn to homebrew. 6. There's one in which we have a devil baby, and I'm not even sure how it got in there. You are there with me for every minute of its painful gestation, rubbing my back in between Zoom meetings with your boss, drawing cold baths when I feel like I'm burning up, making dinner every night, and cleaning the litter box every morning. We have to buy a book called Steps to Raising a Devil Baby, because every time it has a tantrum, it sets more of the house on fire. And even if the Hellgate is shut soon, there's no undoing this one. In between writing angry emails to our state-level practitioners and toting our devil baby to anti-Hellgate protests, we take up gardening. There's something about the give of the soil beneath my knees, the crisp scent of green when I pull a weed, that slows my heart rate back to manageable. My bougainvillea is blooming all year long, and as long as I don't stop to ponder the persistently warm weather that makes this possible, I can glory in the pink vibrance of the yard and pretend this is one of the good outcomes. This is a good one, I whisper as a small root pulls, sucking from the dirt. This is a good one, I whisper as you shout in fear and surprise at some fresh hell inside the house. This is a good one. 7. There is a future in which we stopped it all from happening. The doomsday cultists reached the Hellgate, but they were beaten back before they could crack the seal. Our state-level practitioners heeded the warnings of the great seers and spent a year meticulously building their counteroffensive. We watched the whole thing on live stream with our friends, and we cheered, and you kissed me like nobody else was in the room. I can't see past it, that moment of fracture. I can't see that normal life. This witch's ball you bought on Amazon is pretty good for $27.99 in free shipping, but the imminent horrors are drowning out all other possibilities. Is this thing broken, or is it really going to be that bad? In every other future, I spend far too much time imagining this one, the one where it all turned out okay. I wonder what our lives would look like if we could just focus on our jobs and our friends and save up for a vacation now and then. And while we're at it, what if we didn't have to worry about getting terminally sick at the grocery store? And what if the news wasn't a constant stream of worldwide atrocity? And what if every summer wasn't the hottest summer on record? And what if my sister could send her kids to school every day without worrying about whether they'll come home? At which point I'm forced to admit that things weren't too great before, but we're never going to deal with any of that if we can't get the Hellgate shut. 8. There is a future in which all we do is fight. Our house is a revolving door of people fleeing one overrun district on their way to another. Our days are filled with phone calls and fundraisers and marches and getting locked up overnight and bailing each other out again and studying the forbidden texts for spells to make the evenings just a little bit safer, and it's never enough. All we do is yell at one another because it's not enough. 9. There is a future in which we don't fight at all, and on our deathbeds, this is our greatest regret. 10. There is a future in which nearly all of these things are happening at once and we are overwhelmed. We are fighting and struggling and self-caring our way through the apocalypse, and every day there is something terrible, but also something lovely, and we are caught in constant whiplash between the two. In this life, it is hellfire, not water, that takes our house out, and hellfire is not covered by our insurance policy. We race for our go bags, a California constant even before this mess. And we grab the baby, the cats, our phones and chargers, our vital documents, the first aid kit, and everything else I assembled last wildfire season. Ash is falling outside, reeking of sulfur and leaving bloody smears wherever it lands. Everyone is loading their cars, except for the college students who are still recovering in a government facility near the hospital. We pass some spare N95s to the sisters who live across the street with their mother. We make sure Marilyn and Ted know where they are going. The single dad peels off with his kids. It's a long, choking terror of a drive out of the canyon, but we make it. Your brother lives in an apartment in the city. It's cramped and expensive, but it's safely surrounded by concrete, and he's only a little resentful about shoving all of his exercise equipment into one corner to accommodate the baby pen. We're sharing a mat on the floor that first night. We're lying on our sides, face to face, and my hip hurts already, but I'm not willing to roll over yet. I keep tracing your cheekbones and dwelling on what might have happened if we had slept in and missed the evacuation alert. All of my craft supplies are gone. Your leather working kit, gone. All of our board games, the fancy dice, the garden, the sourdough starter, the spice cabinet, the nice wine we were saving, our soft robes and slippers, the Funko Pop collection, all of the books and movies and video games, every little treat and comfort we'd worked into our days to counteract the onslaught of bad news and petty humiliations of life under a doomsday cult, it's all gone. The witch's ball is gone too, exploded in the heat. But I can't stop thinking of all the other futures I saw that I didn't list here. These are the good ones. These are the good ones. These are the ones in which we're together through the end. And the worst thing we are stricken with is survivor's guilt. But there are other possibilities. There are futures in which you die, of disease, in a riot, gobbled down the maw of a creature long thought lost from the world of man. There are ones in which I die. There are ones in which I go to prison for spreading anti-Hellgate propaganda, and ones in which we lose so many friends and family that we are frozen in a state of perpetual grief. I keep touching your face, and I keep touching your face, and you whisper, I couldn't imagine doing this with anyone else. And that finally sets me blubbering. There is so much that could happen in the next few years, and no bargain bin witch's ball can tell me which of these futures will come true. I don't know who will make it and who won't. I don't know how badly the effects of the Hellgate will ripple around the earth, or how long it will take to close it. I only know that here and now, in this moment of calm between the storms, I'm so glad you're here with me.
Samantha Mills is a Nebula, Locus, and Theodore Sturgeon Memorial Award-winning author living in Southern California. You can find more of her short fiction in Uncanny Magazine, Beneath Ceaseless Skies, Strange Horizons, and others, as well as the best of anthologies, The New Voices of Science Fiction, and the year's Best Science Fiction and Fantasy 2023. Her debut science fantasy novel, The Wings Upon Her Back, is out now. And welcome back, Space Unicorns. Our next story is Butterfly Pavilion by G. Willow Wilson, and this is a flash piece, and it's a very short piece, but also seemingly about the end of days.
It's very powerful.
It is very powerful and also of the moment. It's filled with Willow's beautiful, gorgeous prose and a lot of emotional punch and characterization, even though it is just, a little jewel of a story. These are really, both of these stories are just jewels of stories that really, I think, capture everything going on right now and just the scary but definitely possible path to all our futures together. And now, The Butterfly Pavilion by G. Willow Wilson, as read by Erika Ensign.
There are so many, yellow and silver and black, morphos whose wings are a demure moth brown on one side and iridescent blue on the other, like princesses in disguise. The children follow them around the pavilion on their little tottering feet. Too hot, we say to one another at intervals throughout the day, looking up with pursed lips at the sheer plastic dome that forms the roof of the enclosure. Getting hotter. The generators won't be able to keep up. Over our heads, beyond the plastic sheeting, hovers the relentless sun. For now, The generators keep the pavilion at a steady 79 degrees Fahrenheit. And for the sake of the flowering plants that sustain the butterflies, 70% humidity. There is, at all times, a faint but intrusive smell of rotting fruit. The irony of seeking shelter in a greenhouse is not lost on us, but here we all are, in the last place we could find that still has electricity. We've made our way here at night, 2x2 and 3x3, mothers carrying babies, sons towing elderly grandparents in carts, half-feral groups of teenagers with skinned knees, moth-like ourselves, all fumbling through the profound darkness toward the only thing left that glows. For now, we have water. The butterfly pavilion is not on the city grid or connected to the utilities that went down a few weeks ago. It's out in the empty fields, miles from anywhere specific, a roadside attraction for tourists heading west on I-90. It runs on solar power and well water. A few soft-hearted employees have stayed behind, still wearing their matching polo shirts, to care for these extraordinary insects, and in a sideways fashion for us refugees. They know where everything is, and mostly how everything works, the electrical panel and the compressors and the water filtration system, all of which are now keeping us alive, along with the butterflies. A chicken farmer down the road who refused to abandon his flock trades us eggs for water. One family has a hunting rifle, and a few people who know their way around a gun go out into the foothills to look for game. They bring back a rabbit sometimes. All the deer they have found are dead, their tongues and eyes lolling in the yellow grass. They died of thirst, probably, or smoke inhalation. We can't know for sure. Once the hunting party found the body of a mountain lion in a shallow pool of runoff, already covered in algae and dirt and ash from the fire. He's on his way to becoming fossilized, an omen for whoever comes next. We don't tell the children about the lion or the deer. Instead, we teach them simple arithmetic. One little girl packed her math workbook in her suitcase when her family evacuated, and out of this, we copy problems for the other children. And of course, we are all learning about butterflies. They are so different, these weightless things, from their former caterpillar selves. In their chrysalises, they are reduced to liquid, to a primordial goo, and out of this internal mess, they reconstruct themselves using only the roadmap of their own DNA. This is what we ourselves must learn to do when we leave this place and go out into the wreckage. And we must go out eventually, though we do not admit this to each other. When the eldest of the grandfathers has a heart attack, it is like a little joke. Pottering among the plants one day, he goes white and clutches one arm, and we all cluster around him, help him lie down right there on the gravel path, or rush off for folded towels to pillow his head, for a glass of water, for a precious aspirin tablet. It seems to work because within an hour he's alert and smiling. We all laugh half hysterically, the tremendous giddy laughter of relief. We have come through the first trial together. We can manage. When the grandfather feels strong enough, we carry him to one of the classrooms where we sleep at night and tuck him in. In another day, he is up again, though wobbly, and able to sit in a chair. He eats his eggs and greens with a good appetite. We all keep up a brisk, happy chatter, newly confident in our little pavilion, our ability to survive here, right here. There is light, air, water. We can make it work. We have made it work. 2 days later, the grandfather's feet begin to swell. He complains it's hard to breathe lying down, so we gather hoodies and sweaters and tarps and bundle them behind him to prop him up. He starts to wheeze. His lips are a pale, translucent blue, like the wings of a morpho butterfly. It is difficult to be around him now, to listen to that labored breathing. The children cry, anxious. We grit our teeth. When the rattling breaths stop, we are all asleep. We wake in the morning to find butterflies clustered on his eyelids, drinking his tears. We bury him out in the charred earth, beneath the awful sun, as far as we can manage from the well. No one knows what to tell the children, who walk up and down the gravel paths with hollow eyes. They understand what death is, all of them. They have passed it on the road and in the fields they had to cross to reach this place. None of our meager attempts to comfort them seem to land. This death is different, and we cannot convince them otherwise. This death has slipped between the plastic tarps into a place we told them was safe. We emerge from our grief reconfigured. We can talk about it now, about leaving. We see that we must. Somewhere, there are still doctors. Somewhere there may be schools, clinics, things to eat besides eggs. Our little pavilion, our world of plastic tarps, is only a chrysalis. It's not the place we live. It is the place we leave. But the caretakers in their filthy polo shirts are fretful. What will become of the butterflies? Do we leave the solar generators running to give them as much time as possible? Do we let them out to make their way in the world as best they can, knowing they will likely die? They might not all die, someone points out. Some might survive. Some might thrive and make more of themselves. We could be the reason the world still has butterflies. This is a fantasy, of course. There is nothing outside for the butterflies to eat. No flowers, no fruit, not within a month of walking. Yet still, it is tempting to imagine. We begin to prepare. We fill every available container with well water. We take stock of our eggs, our rabbit jerky, every edible plant in the pavilion. We tell the children we are going on an adventure, and the butterflies are coming with us. We say it until we too believe it. The day will soon come when we must let them out. Let them all out, butterflies and children, into the waiting air.
G. Willow Wilson is co-creator of the Hugo and American Book Award-winning comic book series Ms. Marvel, now a Disney Plus television series, writer of the GLAAD Award-winning Poison Ivy series, and has written for some of the world's best-known superhero comics, including the X-Men, Superman, and Wonder Woman. Her first novel, A Lift the Unseen, won the 2013 World Fantasy Award for Best Novel, was a finalist for the Center for Fiction's First Novel Prize, and was longlisted for the 2013 Women's Prize for Fiction. Her second novel, The Bird King, was named one of the best fantasy novels of the decade by NPR. In 2015, she won the Graphic Literature Innovator Prize at the PEN America Literary Awards. Her work has been translated into over a dozen languages. She lives in Seattle.
This city is a wild animal. I am its broken rib. The city is a fallen star woven in the belly of rust. I try to create something out of dust when the words trickle in. What is a dream? What is in a dream? What are dreams made of? We are tenderness woven into clay, woven into glass, and we are trying to build a thing. What is a thing? What is in a thing? What is a thing that moves with belief? We are trying to create hope out of things in the air. I grasp a handful of sand and blow. The air plucks the particles and turns them into ice. The multiple icicles gather together to form a heart, the shape of a person's cupped hands. Then the bones become ice, and the flesh spilt to form ice. And the eyes, glassy and wide on each side of the head, are made of ice. We bury the creature in a mound of snow. We wait. We do not know for how long it would take, but we wait for the dust to clear, for our hearts to remember the sounds of morning. It is a random day when everything is about to end and the ground opens up itself to swallow the sun. We are at the edge of a cliff and the sky is burning violet. The violence shakes the earth's core and a beauty arises. We birth a creature of fallen stars. Its hands are made of waves.
Rafiat Lamidi is a poet. Her works have been published in Eye of the Telescope, Lulway, Isele Magazine, Lucent Dreaming, and elsewhere. And welcome back, Space Unicorns. It is I, Lynne M. Thomas, your co-editor-in-chief and co-publisher of Uncanny Magazine, and today on the podcast I am joined by the author of one of this month's stories, Samantha Mills. The story is 10 Visions of the Future or Self-Care for the End of Days, Sam, welcome back to the podcast.
Hi. Hello. Thanks for having me on again.
So tell us a little bit about the genesis of this story.
Yes. So this story, I wrote it in the aftermath of the 2024 presidential election.
Heck you say?
I was trying to write something entirely different, and I found myself spiraling out for the months of November and December. And after struggling for a while, I gave in to my urges to get something different out of my system and came up with this. I have some anxiety. If you cannot tell, you'll definitely be able to tell in the story. It always feels like if I can just prepare for every possible disaster scenario somehow, then I will cushion my family from it and we're all going to be okay. Just imagine everything that could go wrong before bed, and then everything's going to be fine and I can go to sleep. And it would be a lot easier. I know it's ridiculous when I say it out loud, and that this is not a thing that is possible to control one's fate. But it would be a lot easier to scale back the anxiety if stuff stopped coming true.
Yes.
It happens. So you can't tell me I'm being irrational when the thing I'm worried about happens.
I'm impressed that as you're iterating, you actually get to sleep, because for me, it's not like that.
Well, I'll get to that. Yeah, we've instituted a phone off in the evening policy, which helped us the last time around. And that's also part of where this story came from, was that notion of how do I find a balance so that I can sleep, so that I can still do normal things during the day, like laundry and planning birthday, and that whiplash between those two modes that we have to operate. So it's, okay, I'm stocking up in the day and I'm making plans and I'm doing all of these things, but I'm not going to get through it if I'm not sleeping.
Yeah.
So the story developed out of that back and forth feeling. And I'm poking a stick at myself because, it does help kind of deflate those spirals when you say it out loud and go, okay, you're kind of going overboard here. If there was a witch's ball that could tell me every bad thing that might happen, I would be addicted to it and ruin my life over it. I feel like I already have something close, which is social media, and that is bad enough. And there's only so much of that I can take per day. So I'm having to find ways to balance that as well. But in this case, I also to rein that impulse in, so I wasn't just making an anxiety attack for readers. It's nobody wants to read that. So it's also a love letter, because even when things are bad, I remember that the people in my life who are keeping me grounded, like my real life, my online friends, but really my real life physical touch friends and my husband. But anybody who's in this mess, I love you. I'm glad we are here together. And it's really important to kind of, keep those connections, because they're what are getting us through.
So obviously this is the second time we've had you on the podcast.
Yeah.
This is the second time that we've had you on the podcast with a story that is directly in relation to political happenings in a timely manner. So now you're one of the people who is writing stories that directly interact with the world being on fire. How in this cascade of potential apocalypses, how did you choose?
I know I didn't mean to become this author, but it seems to have just happened anyway. It's like when it's all you can think about, it's kind of all you can write about for a while. Yes, the last time it was for a rabbit test, which is in Uncanny, if anyone hasn't read it. And in that case, I was dealing with something so much more specific. I had a lot of real historical detail to go on. We know where we've been, we know what they're trying to do and where it's going to go. And it was all very circular. And so I could write it that way. In this case, it's the opposite. I feel like I'm on quicksand. There's so much happening, and we don't know which bits are going to stick, and we don't know which are going to get blocked, and we don't know which are going to completely surprise us because we didn't even have that on our list to begin with. That I could not write it in that same way. I needed that layer of metaphor on top because reality feels like a moving target. If I had written down specifically what I'm worried about in December, then this would be quaint today because the past couple weeks have been so wild. Like that would have been just completely dated and gone already, like, in the course of a month. And by the time this aired, like if we sat down for an hour right now and went over the news, like by the time this airs, it's going to be yesterday's fire, and we're going to be on to the next one. So to make this story, I decided instead to focus on that feeling. That destabilized feeling of not knowing what it's going to be, which is the source of the fear that is not unfounded, because they are flooding the zone. They're throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what sticks. And it's like, to exhaust people, trying to put out all the little fires that you can't get to everything. So picking them, I sat down, which it wasn't difficult to sit down and brainstorm things I'm worried about. But I made it those more general categories. So like a new virus, natural disasters. I'm in Southern California, so I'm always worried about my house burning down. I'm like in a canyon surrounded by chaparral brush. And so that worked its way in there. But it's also that feeling of fantastical horror. Like it feels like a march of eldritch nightmares that are rolling out, invited in by a doomsday cult that really is a doomsday cult. So that was the process of tapping into the feelings and the real things, but kind of couching them in a way that we could still read in a couple months.
Right.
I feel the same way about.
So you talked a little bit at the top of this recording about, sort of trying to work your way through the rules you have in your house for no phones after a certain time, and sort of all of the things that you're doing to take care of yourself. And of course, this story hinges on that tension between needing to take care of yourself and the urgency of doing something, anything, to be able to push back, to be able to mitigate, to be able to survive. So how did you take that tension that you're living and translate it into a story?
It's something I'm keenly aware of, that we're all making this calculus in a different way, that there are groups immediately under attack and groups that aren't. And so that balance can also be filled with a lot of guilt of, oh, I have this still, and not everybody has this still. So I'm doing something nice for myself, but then am I doing enough equally for others at the same time? And I know everybody I know is trying to figure out the right balance, how to stay informed and get prepared, but without burning out. Because I also know people that have gone, I'm clocking out, I'm putting my head in the sand. And that's like a particular privilege they have because it's not at their doorstep yet. But how do you get, you got to come back. Like, everyone needs to find a way to maintain their sanity in the face of instability. But I don't think that answer is to, do nothing and hope it doesn't reach you. So, yeah, personally, we did make, put our phones away in the evening. If something happens in the night, it's still going to be there in the morning. There's nothing I can do about that. So it's, read, watch a movie. I'll crochet at the same time if I really can't keep my hands off of my phone, like, because in the day it has to be near me in case of emergency at all times, if the school calls, this or that. And so it's hard to get it out of the way. But that whiplash is so unreal. It's surreal to watch all of this unfold all day and to be, running through what tasks you can do and making phone calls and making donations, or if you're actually in an area that's protesting, getting out, like physically getting out and doing things. For some people, it's their job already, touches base on one of these. And so you can feel some purpose in your job, but then you still have to do your laundry. And all, this normal stuff. It's just a weird dystopia. And it's the roller coaster. So even like going online, where I cut most social media, but I kept like Blue Sky because, okay, it wasn't so toxic. I'm getting real news there that is useful, but the feed can be this back and forth fire hose of like bad news, somebody telling you to drink water, back to bad news, somebody yelling at you to log off and do self-care. Now it's a picture of a dog. Now it's more bad news. It's not healthy, but in the absence of, a centralized location for all of this news, you kind of feel stuck on it. Like, don't look away, but also take care of yourself. I had this complex feeling about the concept of self-care to begin with. I think it kind of gets, like all things, it'll get kind of co-opted by people that want an excuse to do nothing. Like, self-care is supreme, but you got to also be doing something to be caring for yourself after. It started as a medical concept. Like in the 60s and 70s, they were finally understanding that some jobs, medical care, are deeply traumatizing. And so the only way for carers to keep going is to take care of themselves so they can take care of other people.
Right.
And then the women's and civil rights movements, it was taken up as a concept in activism because our bodies are literally made ill by all of these stress hormones running through us from whether it's just seeing trauma or whether being victimized by individuals or systemic problems or, unequal access to healthcare. All of it makes us more ill. And so taking care of yourself keeps you in the fight. And this is especially women of color, our trans friends. Like, there are people worse off than me. Well, hopefully still middle class, but we'll see over the next couple of years. White woman with a house. That it's just a different, like I said, a different calculus of how you take care of yourself and what you're able to do. So when I think of self-care, I think, okay, but what are you recovering from? Like, are you actually helping? Are you actually under attack? And it can help, I think, come up with that balance that I was talking about of figuring out what are your limitations so you don't burn out, but what can you actually do within those limitations, if that makes sense.
So on a lighter note,
yeah.
because, we're all experiencing this wonderful emotional whiplash.
Yes.
Can you tell us, Sam, about something that you've read or watched or consumed lately that you'd like to share with our listeners?
I do. So I just read Metal from Heaven by August Clark, and it came out, I think, in late October. So it kind of got buried at the end of the year under everything that's been going on. But I wish it was on every ballot, and I wish it was getting, splashed all over the place. It is so fierce. It's like a trans and lesbian revenge story and a biker gang versus capitalism story, but it's also very personal and visceral, with a very tortured narrator who has been kind of cracked by trauma, and she's a little bit insane. It's hard to tell. It's first person. You'll have to read and kind of gauge. But the end goes so hard. It's hard to describe without spoiling it. But please just read Metal from Heaven.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sam, for joining us on the podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you, Space Unicorns, for once again listening to the Uncanny Magazine podcast. As always, we couldn't do it without you, whether you are patrons on Patreon, backers on Kickstarter, people who just spread the word around, someone who gets a subscription via Waitlist Books. Whatever you do to support us, we greatly appreciate it. But we definitely couldn't do the Space Unicorns without the greatest staff in the universe.
That includes our managing editor, Monty Lynne, our poetry editor, Betsy Aoki, our podcast producers, Erika Ensign and Stephen Shapansky, our podcast readers, Matt Peters and Erika Ensign, our interviewer, Carolyn M. Yoakum, our assistant editor, Tanya Chen, and all of our submissions editors.
So until next time, stay safe out there, Space Unicorns.
Shine on, Space Unicorns, and call your reps.
Yay!
The Uncanny Magazine podcast theme is courtesy Null Device. Want to join the Space Unicorn Ranger Corps? You can find poetry, stories, and nonfiction every month in Uncanny Magazine. Go to uncannymagazine.com or subscribe to the ebook version at waitlistbooks.com. Uncanny Magazine podcast, copyright Uncanny Magazine.